In the Brown family, not all pain was created equal. While some children suffered through life-altering surgery alone, their pleas for their father met with sterile silence and excuses. Others were allegedly crippled by a pervasive anxiety that required a 24/7 paternal presence. We see a montage of a brave Isabel Brown, post-op, bearing the fresh, brutal scars of spinal fusion surgery, her mother Christine her only comfort. We see a frantic Christine rushing a listless, gray-skinned Truly to the hospital, her tiny body ravaged by kidney failure. Then the scene shifts. We see Robyn Brown, her face a mask of concern, telling the cameras her children are struggling, that they have anxiety, that they just can't cope without their father, Kody, right there, in their home, a constant shield against the world. Was this a tragic coincidence of timing and emotional needs, or a calculated manipulative strategy designed for a hostile takeover of a family? If you are ready to pull back the curtain on what might be the most sinister manipulation in reality television history, a story of weaponized therapy and the alleged fraudulent use of children's mental health, then you are in the right place. Settle in, because we have the exclusive reports on the lawsuit that could shatter the Brown family forever. Before we dive into the courtroom drama, the bombshell testimony, and the cold, hard evidence, make sure you hit that subscribe button for COCO gossip and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss a single update on this explosive story. Welcome to the trial of the century for Sister Wives fans. This isn't about property lines in Coyote Pass or who gets the best spot in the family rotation. This is about a fundamental betrayal, a charge so severe it cuts to the very heart of the family's professed beliefs. According to our insider sources, Kody Brown, joined by Janelle Brown as a co-plaintiff, has filed a civil suit against Robyn Brown. The charges are tortious interference with familial relationships and fraud. The damages sought, a staggering $500,000. The core of the accusation is that for over a decade, Robyn Brown deliberately, methodically, and maliciously fabricated and exaggerated the severity of her children's health issues, specifically anxiety, for the sole purpose of monopolizing Kody Brown's time, affection, and the family's shared financial resources. They allege that in doing so, she systematically dismantled the unwritten yet sacred contract of a functioning plural family, which dictates a fair and equitable distribution of the husband, the father, the patriarch. This lawsuit isn't just about money, it's a legal and moral reckoning. To understand the gravity of tortious interference in this context, you have to understand the foundational principle of the Brown family's life, at least as it was presented to the world. A plural family is not four separate families. It is one family with one husband and father at its center, whose time and resources are meant to be shared. The unwritten contract is a covenant of fairness. Each wife, and by extension her children, trusts that the husband will allocate his presence based on genuine need, not preference or manipulation. The lawsuit alleges that Robyn intentionally and maliciously interfered with this contract. She didn't just ask for more time, she allegedly created a justification for it that was unassailable. By claiming her children were in a perpetual state of emotional crisis, she created a trump card. How could Kody, or any of the other wives, challenge a child's mental health without appearing monstrous? It was the perfect insidious strategy. The charge of fraud stems from the allegation that these claims were not just exaggerated but knowingly false, a deliberate misrepresentation used to gain a material advantage, that advantage being Kody himself and all the financial and emotional support that came with him. The plaintiff's case, as laid out in these documents, is built not on feelings or jealousy, but on a chilling pattern of behavior meticulously documented over 12 years of reality television. The legal team for Christine and Janelle has presented what they call the crisis correlation. It's a timeline that cross-references every major life event for the original 13 children, the OG-13 as the fans call them, with Robyn's on-screen claims of a concurrent crisis at her home. The pattern is as undeniable as it is heartbreaking. Let's begin with one of the most glaring examples: Isabel Brown's scoliosis surgery. This wasn't a minor event. This was a grueling, life-altering 12-hour procedure to correct a painful, debilitating curvature of the spine. A teenage girl facing a terrifying medical ordeal, a surgery so intense it would leave her with metal rods fused to her spine and a recovery period measured in months of agony. Every child in that situation deserves their father, Isabel begged for her father to be there. Christine begged for her. The need was tangible, documented, and desperate. What was Kody's reason for not traveling to New Jersey for the surgery? The COVID-19 pandemic. He claimed the travel and quarantine protocols were too strict, that he couldn't be away from the rest of the family for that long. It was an excuse that, on the surface, seemed rooted in his new hyper-vigilant set of family rules. But the lawsuit alleges this was a smokescreen, a convenient public-facing excuse to cover for the real reason he couldn't leave, the manufactured anxiety crisis at Robyn's home. During this exact period, the fall of 2020, what was happening on screen in Robyn's $1 million house? We saw Robyn repeatedly express that her children, particularly Solomon and Ariella, were suffering from extreme separation anxiety. She claimed they couldn't handle their father being gone for even a short period. Kody echoed this, stating that his youngest children were not handling the pandemic well, and that his presence was essential for their emotional stability. The lawsuit argues that this was a deliberate, coordinated narrative. While Isabel was physically preparing for surgeons to break and reset her spine, Robyn was allegedly cultivating an emotional crisis that made it impossible for Kody to fulfill his paternal duty. The real, acute medical trauma of one daughter was superseded by the vague, unsubstantiated emotional fragility of other children. The crisis correlation timeline shows this was not a one-off event. Let's go back further. Remember Truly Brown's near-fatal battle with kidney failure in 2014? A 5-year-old girl, lethargic, cross-eyed from dehydration, her body shutting down. Christine was alone, shuttling between her other children and the hospital, facing the terrifying possibility of losing her daughter. Where was Kody for a significant portion of this critical time? He was, according to on-screen evidence, dealing with the emotional fallout of the family's catfishing scandal, a drama centered squarely on his first wife, Mary. But who was his primary confidant, his emotional anchor during this time? Robyn. The show depicted him spending hours at Robyn's house discussing the drama, seeking her counsel, and comforting her and her children from the stress of it all. Again, a real, life-threatening crisis in one home is paralleled by an emotional drama that keeps Kody anchored in another. The pattern continues, a drumbeat of neglect and excuses. When Janelle's son, Garrison, left for the National Guard, a proud, pivotal moment for a young man, Kody was distracted, embroiled in conflicts that seemed to originate from or be amplified by his interactions with Robyn. When Mykelti, Christine's daughter, gave birth to her first child, Avalon, Kody was a notable no-show for the birth, citing COVID rules once again, yet he was consistently present for every minor event, every school drop-off, every sniffle within the walls of Robyn's home. Birthdays for the OG-13 were missed, graduations were unattended, important milestones passed with a phone call, if that, while Kody played the role of the ever-present doting father to one specific set of children. Each time a real, tangible need arose in Christine's or Janelle's homes, a phantom menace of anxiety, stress, or emotional distress would invariably rise in Robyn's, acting as a gravitational force, pulling Kody back into its orbit, preventing him from being the father his other children desperately needed. The lawsuit posits that this wasn't bad luck or poor time management. It was a strategy, as deliberate and effective as a military campaign. This leads us to the most sinister part of the prosecution's argument, the concept of weaponized therapy. The plaintiffs argue that Robyn, with Kody's willing complicity, didn't just make up excuses. She co-opted the very language of mental health to create a permanent, unchallengeable pretext for Kody's constant presence. In today's world, we are rightly encouraged to take mental health seriously. To question the validity of someone's anxiety is to risk being labeled as cruel, dismissive, or unenlightened. Robyn and Kody allegedly exploited this societal progress. They wrapped their justification in the unimpeachable language of therapy and trauma. Think about it. If Robyn had simply said, "I want Kody here all the time because I'm insecure," the other wives could have argued. They could have pointed to the principles of their faith, the needs of the other children, the inherent unfairness. But when she said, "My children have anxiety and they need their father, their protector, to feel safe," the argument was over before it began. It was a checkmate. It created a situation where any objection from Christine, Janelle, or Mary would sound like they were dismissing the suffering of a child. It was the perfect trap. They created a fortress of feigned fragility, and Kody was the sole knight designated to guard it, leaving the rest of his kingdom to fend for itself. This alleged manipulation wasn't just about monopolizing Kody's time, it was about establishing a moral and emotional hierarchy within the family. By constantly framing her children as the most vulnerable, the most in need of protection, Robyn effectively positioned her family unit as the most important. Her children's needs, because they were labeled as mental health crises, were automatically elevated above the more mundane needs of the other children. Needs like having a father at a spinal surgery or a graduation or the birth of a grandchild. It was a quiet, insidious coup executed not with anger or demands, but with tears and therapeutic buzzwords. But in a court of law, claims require proof. Feelings are not facts. And this is where the case against Robyn Brown allegedly moves from a he said, she said family drama to a compelling legal argument supported by bombshell evidence. The plaintiff's legal team didn't just rely on old clips from a reality show. They went digging. And what they found, according to these reports, is what turns this from a family dispute into a potential case of provable fraud. Their star witness was set to be the one person who could professionally validate or dismantle Robyn's central claim, the Browns' former family therapist. Let's call her Dr. Evelyn Reed for the purposes of our report. Subpoenaed to testify, Dr. Reed was considered a hostile witness. She had worked with the family for years, and her testimony was expected to be guarded, protected by patient confidentiality. But the court, recognizing the welfare of the 18 children at the center of this family, compelled her to answer specific questions about the patterns of treatment sought by the parents for the children. What she revealed under oath, our sources say, sent a shockwave through the courtroom. Christine's lawyer began the questioning calmly. Dr. Reed, you served as the family therapist for the Brown family for approximately 4 years, is that correct? Yes, it is. And during your sessions with Kody and Robyn Brown, was the topic of their children's anxiety a frequent subject of discussion? Dr. Reed adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. It was mentioned frequently, yes, particularly by Ms. Brown. And did you, based on these discussions, recommend a course of treatment for the children, perhaps individual therapy sessions, to address these specific anxieties? This was the pivotal question. The therapist took a long pause before answering. I recommended individual therapy for the children on numerous occasions. I believed it was essential to assess each child's needs independently of the parental narrative. And did those individual sessions take place? The lawyer pressed. No, Dr. Reed stated, her voice firm. Miss Brown consistently refused to allow the children to be seen individually. She insisted that all therapy must be conducted with her and sometimes Kody present. A murmur went through the courtroom. The lawyer continued. So, in your professional capacity, you were never able to speak with Dayton, Aurora, Solomon, or Brianna alone to assess their alleged anxiety disorders? That is correct, but the bombshell was yet to come. The lawyer produced a set of documents. Dr. Reed, these are the appointment logs from your office for the Brown family, specifically for sessions scheduled by Robyn Brown for her children's emotional well-being. Can you confirm their authenticity? She reviewed them. Yes, these are our records. According to these laws, the lawyer said, his voice rising, over the 4-year period you treated the family, Ms. Brown either canceled or failed to show up for over 70% of the appointments she scheduled for her children. Can you offer a professional insight into this pattern? The therapist looked directly at the judge. A 70% cancellation rate is highly unusual for a parent genuinely seeking treatment for a child's persistent mental health condition. Consistent therapy is the cornerstone of treatment for anxiety. This level of inconsistency is a significant red flag. A red flag for what, doctor? And then came the line that would define the trial. In my professional opinion, Dr. Reed said, her words slow and deliberate, the concept of the children's anxiety was used more as a narrative tool for the parents to process their own dynamics and to justify certain family decisions, rather than a genuine, consistent effort to seek and engage in treatment for the children themselves. a narrative tool, not a diagnosis, not a cry for help, a tool, a weapon, a story crafted by the parents for their own benefit. The testimony was devastating. It suggested that the therapy sessions weren't about healing children, they were about workshopping a script Robyn could use to explain why Kody always had to be with her, a script Kody could use to justify his abandonment of his other children. It was the expert opinion the plaintiffs needed, alleging that the very foundation of Robyn's defense was a sham. If the therapist's testimony was the psychological bombshell, the next piece of evidence was the factual kill shot. The prosecution presented certified school records for Robyn's children, Dayton, Aurora, Brianna, and Solomon, for the years they resided in both Las Vegas and Flagstaff. In a case built on claims of debilitating anxiety, of children too fragile to function without their father's constant presence, these records told a shockingly different story. The lawyer for Christine and Janelle presented the documents on a large screen for the court to see. These are the attendance records for Solomon Brown during the 2020-2021 school year, he announced. This is the same period that his older sister, Isabel, was undergoing and recovering from major spinal surgery. During the same period, Miss Brown and Mr. Brown claimed on national television that Solomon's anxiety was so severe that Kody could not possibly travel and leave him. The camera would zoom in on the document. A sea of present marks, no absences, not one. At the bottom of the record was a small printed commendation. Congratulations, Solomon Brown, recipient of the Perfect Attendance Award. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The discrepancy was not just a minor inconsistency, it was a direct factual contradiction of everything Robyn and Kody had claimed. The lawyer wasn't finished. He pulled up the records for Aurora and Brianna. Near perfect attendance for both, year after year. He then explained to the court what the records didn't show. Your Honor, he addressed the judge, for a child who suffers from a diagnosed anxiety disorder that impacts their functioning, as Ms. Brown has repeatedly claimed, we would expect to see certain accommodations in their school file. We would look for a 504 plan or an individualized education program, an IEP. These are legal documents created by the school in conjunction with parents and medical professionals to provide support, like extended time on tests, a quiet space to de-escalate, or excused absences for therapy. The school records for Robyn Brown's children show no requests for such plans, no accommodations were ever sought, there are no notes from doctors or therapists on file indicating a need for special consideration due to anxiety. He then presented records for the older children. Dayton, during his time in college, was shown to be an active participant in campus life. Aurora, lauded for her academic achievements. Brianna, involved in school activities. The picture painted by these official third-party documents was not one of children crippled by anxiety, unable to function. It was a picture of normal, healthy, high-achieving kids who went to school every day, participated in activities, and earned awards. This evidence suggested that the debilitating anxiety seemed to exist only within the confines of their home, and, more specifically, only when Kody's attention was required elsewhere. This set the stage for the most dramatic moment of the trial, Robyn Brown taking the stand. Dressed in a conservative, dark outfit, she appeared emotional before the questioning even began. Christine's lawyer approached her not with aggression, but with a calm, almost surgical precision. He started gently, establishing the timeline of Isabel's surgery. He had Robyn confirm that she was aware of the date, the severity, and Isabel's desire for her father to be present. Then, he moved to the heart of the matter. Ms. Brown, he said, holding up the school record. This is your son Solomon's Perfect Attendance Award. It was issued for the school year spanning from August 2020 to May 2021. Isabel's surgery was in September of 2020, the same month you claimed on television that Solomon was too anxious for Kody to travel. Can you explain this discrepancy to the court? Robyn's eyes filled with tears. Her voice trembled as she responded, a near-perfect echo of her on-screen persona. You don't understand, she began, her voice cracking. You don't know what it's like. He's a sensitive pie. He can be brave for school, he can put on a brave face, but at home, he falls apart. He needs his daddy. He just needs his daddy. The lawyer let her finish, his expression unchanged. He did not challenge her statement about Solomon's sensitivity. He didn't have to. He simply moved to the final, devastating question. He paused, letting the weight of the moment fill the room, and then he looked directly at her. "Ms. Brown," he asked, his voice low and clear, "did he need his daddy more than a teenage girl undergoing a painful 12-hour spinal surgery? A trauma that has left her with real diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition her own therapist has attributed in part to her father's abandonment during her time of greatest need. Is that what you are asking this court, this family, and your other daughters to believe, that your son's alleged after-school anxiety, for which he received a perfect attendance award, was a greater need than Isabel's documented physical and psychological trauma?" The question hung in the air, an indictment of a decade of alleged choices. There was no good answer. To say yes would be monstrous. To say no would be to admit the entire foundation of her defense was a lie. Robyn could only break down into sobs, a performance the plaintiffs argued was not a sign of grief, but an admission of guilt, the final act in a long-running play of manipulation and deceit. The betrayal, as framed by the prosecution, was not merely about time or resources. It was about the sinister use of children as pawns in a marital power struggle. In a plural family, where a father's love and attention are the most precious and finite resources, creating a perpetual, unchallengeable medical need is the ultimate trump card. It's a move that invalidates the real, tangible needs of 13 other children. It's a strategy that ensures your family, your children, your needs will always come first, no matter the cost to the others. The prosecution argued that Robyn didn't just play the game better than the other wives. She broke the game itself, rewriting the rules to ensure she was the only winner, leaving a trail of emotionally neglected children in her wake. The fallout from that final question was immediate and total. The prosecution had effectively backed Robyn into a corner from which there was no escape. Any answer she could give would be an indictment. The courtroom, according to our sources, was heavy with the weight of years of unspoken truth. The lawyer for Christine and Janelle had one final piece of business. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution rests." The closing arguments that followed were less a presentation of new facts and more a summation of two completely irreconcilable realities, two competing narratives of the same family history. Robyn's defense attorney went first, attempting to repair the catastrophic damage done on the stand. His strategy was to reframe the entire lawsuit as an act of petty jealousy, a bitter reprisal from women who had failed at the principle of plural marriage and were now seeking to punish the one wife who had succeeded. He painted a portrait of Robyn as a victim, a woman who had entered a complex family dynamic and had been ostracized from the beginning. He argued that her only crime was being a deeply empathetic and protective mother. "What have we truly heard in this courtroom?" he began, his voice resonating with manufactured indignation. "We have heard the grievances of two women who, by their own admission, chose to leave a marriage of their own free will. They are now attempting to use this court to rewrite history, to monetize their own unhappiness. They have put Robyn Brown on trial not for any provable offense, but for the crime of being a good mother. They have taken a child's complex internal struggle with anxiety, an invisible illness that millions of families grapple with, and have twisted it into a malicious conspiracy." He addressed the school records head-on. "The plaintiffs have made a great show of perfect attendance awards, but anyone who has ever loved a child with anxiety knows that a school day is a performance. These children, these brave children, were taught to be strong, to put on a brave face for the world. They held it together for 6 hours a day at school, only to collapse in the safety of their home, in the arms of their mother and their father. Does that sound like fraud, or does that sound like the reality of childhood anxiety? They are punishing a child for being resilient in public while ignoring his private pain." He attempted to discredit the therapist's testimony. "We heard from one therapist with one opinion, an opinion, I might add, that was formed without ever having the individual sessions she herself recommended. Why? Because a protective mother, Miss Brown, felt it was crucial to be present, to advocate for her children, to ensure the narrative of their family was not misunderstood. Is this an obstruction, or is it engaged, careful parenting? To suggest that therapy was a narrative tool is a cynical, callous interpretation of a family genuinely trying to navigate their challenges in the public eye. His closing plea was aimed directly at the heart, a desperate attempt to reclaim the emotional high ground. This is not a case about resources. This is a case about resentment. Christine and Janelle Brown are asking you to place a monetary value on their perceived slights. They are asking you to punish Robyn Brown for Kody Brown's decisions. Kody is the patriarch of this family. He makes the choices. If they are unhappy with his allocation of time, their grievance is with him, not with the wife who simply provided him with a loving, stable, and emotionally supportive home. Do not reward this bitterness. Do not validate this vengeful attack on a mother and her children. Fine for the defendant and let this family heal without the poison of this litigation. Then it was the plaintiff's turn. Christine and Janelle's lawyers stood up, the stack of evidence on his table a silent testament to his case. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His argument was built on the cold, hard foundation of facts, patterns, and the damning testimony the court had already heard. "Your Honor," he started, "the defense has just described this lawsuit as an act of bitterness and resentment. They are, in a way, correct. But the bitterness is not born of jealousy. It is born of watching 13 children be systematically relegated to second-class status in their own family. The resentment is not born of a failed marriage, but of a fraudulent one, a plural family structure that was hollowed out from the inside by a campaign of emotional manipulation." He walked the court back through the evidence, piece by damning piece. "We are not here to debate the complexities of anxiety. We are here to debate the facts of a fraud. The defense would have you believe that Solomon Brown's anxiety was so severe, it prevented his father from attending a 12-hour spinal surgery, yet so manageable that it allowed him to never miss a single day of school. This is not a paradox, it is a lie, a convenient, weaponized lie. They would have you believe Robyn Brown was a deeply concerned parent desperate to get her children help, but the records from their own therapist show a 7% cancellation rate, 70%. That is not the behavior of a parent seeking healing. That is the behavior of a person using the appearance of therapy as a shield, a justification, a tool to be wielded when needed and discarded when not. The therapist herself called it a narrative tool. And that is precisely what it was, a story crafted to ensure Kody Brown never had a legitimate reason to be anywhere but at Robyn's side. He then addressed the core betrayal, moving beyond the legal definitions to the human cost. Tortious interference is a legal term, but what it means in this family is the deliberate severing of a sacred bond between a father and his children. Every time Kody Brown missed a birthday, a graduation, a life-altering surgery for one of the original 13 children, it was not an accident. It was a choice enabled and actively encouraged by a manufactured crisis in Robyn Brown's home. She did not just ask for Kody's time, she created a moral and emotional justification so powerful that to deny it would have made Kody seem like a monster. And so, to avoid being a monster to her children, he became a ghost to his others. He looked over at Christine and Janelle, who sat with a quiet, resolute dignity. This lawsuit is not, at its heart, about money. The $500,000 sought is a symbolic number. It is an attempt to quantify the unquantifiable, the cost of a father's absence. It is for the therapy these 13 children now need to process the very real, very documented trauma of their calculated abandonment. It is for Isabel, who has a PTSD diagnosis directly linked to her father's absence at her surgery. It is for Truly, who nearly died while her father was preoccupied with dramas centered in another home. It is for Garrison and Gabriel, who were effectively disowned for daring to have lived outside the bubble of their father's increasingly narrow world. It is for all of them. His final words were a quiet condemnation. Robyn Brown did not just want a husband, she wanted a monopoly, and to achieve it, she weaponized the language of mental health, used her children as pawns, and systematically dismantled a family from within. She created a narrative of fragility to hide a reality of ruthless ambition. The evidence is clear, the pattern is undeniable. We ask the court to see through the tears, to look at the facts, and to deliver the only verdict that justice allows. We ask you to find for the plaintiffs and in doing so to finally officially validate the pain of 13 children who were told for years that their needs did not matter. The judge, a seasoned jurist who had seen every flavor of family dispute, took several days to deliberate. Our sources inside the court reported that the judge revisited the evidence meticulously. The school records laid out next to transcripts of the show, the therapist's appointment logs cross-referenced with the crisis correlation timeline. This wasn't a simple ruling on feelings. It was an exercise in pattern recognition. The judge had to decide if the mountain of circumstantial evidence, bolstered by the therapist's expert testimony and the concrete factual records, was enough to prove intent. Did Robyn Brown intentionally create a false narrative to interfere with the familial contract? Was it a deliberate act of fraud? The day the judgment was to be read, the courtroom was packed. Kody sat beside Robyn, his face a thunderous mask of defiance. Christine and Janelle sat with their lawyer, their expressions calm, as if the verdict itself was secondary to the act of having finally told their truth in a forum that was forced to listen. The judge entered and the room fell silent. She put on her glasses and looked down at the documents before her, but she did not read from them at first. Instead, she looked directly at the parties involved. "In the matter of Brown versus Brown," she began, her voice steady and clear, "this court was asked to adjudicate a case that is, on its surface, about money, but is, at its core, about the very definition of fairness and truth within a family. The plaintiffs, Ms. Christine Brown and Ms. Janelle Brown, have alleged that the defendant, Ms. Robyn Brown, engaged in a protracted campaign of fraudulent misrepresentation and tortious interference, resulting in material and emotional damages to their children." She paused, letting the weight of the formal language settle. The defense argued that this court has no place dictating the internal dynamics of a family, particularly a plural family with its own unique set of rules and beliefs. On that point, the defense is partially correct. This court does not rule on feelings. It does not punish jealousy or favoritism. It rules on evidence. She then picked up a summary of the findings. However, when a pattern of behavior is so clear, so consistent, and so overwhelmingly supported by factual third-party evidence, it moves beyond the realm of internal family dynamics and into the realm of a provable deliberate strategy. This court finds that there is overwhelming evidence of a pattern of behavior where alleged emotional distress was weaponized to gain an unfair advantage in the allocation of shared family resources, the primary resource being the husband, Kody Brown. A collective gasp was audible. The judge continued, her voice gaining force. "The plaintiffs have successfully demonstrated what they have termed the crisis correlation. Time and again, a documented significant need in one of the plaintiffs' homes was met with a concurrent, unsubstantiated, and emotionally charged crisis in the defendant's home. While correlation does not always equal causation, the sheer volume of these instances, stretching over a decade, points to a calculated design rather than mere coincidence. This conclusion," she went on, "is cemented by two key pieces of evidence. First, the expert testimony of the family's own therapist, who stated under oath that therapy was used as a narrative tool by the parents, and that the defendant canceled or missed over 70% of scheduled appointments for the children she claimed were in crisis. This is not the behavior of a parent desperate for help. It is the behavior of someone maintaining a pretense. Second, and most damningly, are the official school records. These documents directly and unequivocally contradict the defendant's claims. The claim that a child is too debilitated by anxiety to be without his father is rendered entirely incredible when that same child is simultaneously earning an award for perfect school attendance, with no medical accommodations on file. One of these things is not true. The evidence makes it clear which one." She looked directly at Robyn. To use the language of mental health, a shield meant to protect the vulnerable, as a sword to carve out a larger piece of a shared life, is a profound and sinister betrayal. It not only harmed the other children in the family by invalidating their own tangible needs, but it also did a disservice to the defendant's own children, casting them as perpetual victims in a drama of their mother's creation. It is a form of fraud that leaves the deepest scars. The judgment was clear. Now comes the ruling. "Therefore," the judge announced, her voice leaving no room for ambiguity, This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs on both counts: tortious interference with familial relationships and fraud. The question now turns to damages. While no amount of money can undo the years of emotional neglect suffered by the plaintiff's children, the court can provide a means for healing. The court hereby awards the sum of $500,000 to the plaintiffs, Christine and Janelle Brown. This sum is not to be paid from any shared Brown family assets or from Kody Brown. It is a personal judgment against Robyn Brown to be paid from her personal assets. Furthermore, the court orders that these funds are to be placed directly into a court-supervised trust. The sole beneficiaries of this trust will be the 13 children of Kody Brown and his first 3 wives: Logan, Aspen, Leon, Madison, Mykelti, Hunter, Pedon, Garrison, Dayton, Gabriel, Gwendolyn, Aurora, and Isabel. Oh wait, I am sorry. The court orders that the sole beneficiaries of this trust will be the 13 children of Kody Brown and his first 3 wives: Logan, Aspen, Leon, Madison, Mykelti, Hunter, Pedon, Garrison, Gabriel, Gwendolyn, Isabel, Savannah, and Truly. The funds in this trust are to be used exclusively for any therapy, counseling, or mental health treatment they may seek to address the long-term psychological effects of their father's calculated abandonment and the family dynamics that precipitated it. The trust will be managed by an independent trustee, ensuring the funds are used for their intended purpose of healing. It was a stunning, surgically precise ruling. It wasn't just a victory, it was a complete and total vindication. The court didn't just give Christine and Janelle money, it gave their children the very thing Robyn had allegedly pretended to seek for her own: legitimate, funded, professional help. It affirmed with the full weight and authority of the law that their pain was real, that it was caused by the actions of their father and stepmother, and that it deserved to be healed. This was a moral and psychological victory. The court had officially validated what Christine, Janelle, and the millions of viewers who watched their story unfold had always known. Deep down, their children's pain was real and had been systematically ignored, while Robyn's children's alleged pain was exaggerated and exploited for control and personal gain. The aftermath in the courtroom was a tableau of defeated ambition and quiet triumph. Robyn Brown, our insiders report, was utterly shell-shocked, her face pale, the tears frozen on her cheeks. The narrative she had so carefully constructed for over a decade had been legally dismantled and labeled a fraud. Kody Brown was reportedly incandescent with rage, muttering about appeals and the injustice of the system, unable to process a reality where his choices and Robyn's had tangible legal consequences. But for Christine and Janelle, there was a profound sense of peace. They embraced, tears of relief streaming down their faces. They hadn't just won a lawsuit, they had won back their children's truth. They had fought for the acknowledgement that Isabel's surgery mattered, that Truly's illness mattered, that their son's transition to adulthood mattered. They had proven that the unwritten rules of their family, the covenant of fairness, had been broken, and now the perpetrator was being held to account. So what is the final verdict from the court of public opinion and from us here at COCO Gossip? The verdict is guilty. Guilty of weaponizing the language of mental health to execute a hostile takeover of a father's love and attention. Guilty of perpetrating a long con, a slow-motion fraud that left a wake of emotional devastation. This lawsuit, if our insider reports prove true, represents a landmark moment in reality television. It's a reminder that the pain and trauma depicted on screen can have real-world consequences, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the truth finds a way to be heard, not just in a confessional interview, but under oath in a court of law where attendance records and therapy logs cannot tell a lie. The Sister Wives saga may not be over, but this chapter, the one where the truth was finally given its day in court, has come to a definitive and, for 13 children, a just conclusion. We are now getting late-breaking reports that Kody Brown was seen leaving the courthouse, yelling at paparazzi that this was an attack on his family and that he would spend every last dime protecting his tender-aged children from their bitter, vengeful mothers. It seems the battle may be over, but the war for the soul of the Brown family is just beginning.